Mangalacharan, and then we'll speak something on the verse number 4. Verse number 4 of Manah Siksa. So I'll just say some prayers. Magyanatamurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vidam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Virjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so first we'll ask for permission and blessings from our worshipful seniors, Samaraj, and also my other elders in the room, other Prabhupada disciples. So we can continue on in this series, Manah Siksa, Splendid Instructions to the Mind by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. So just to highlight the journey we've been on so far. So in the first verse, as Marge gave this elaboration on this verse, this emphasis on giving up pride is there in the first verse. Having given up all pride, please develop unprecedented and excessive attachment, and then it's many different areas of attachment: Sri Guru, Vrindavan, the cows, residents of Vrindavan, etc. And one of the points that was being made was that the mind is always chanchalahi mana Krishna, flickering by nature. And so this verse is also giving us those aspects of devotion, not just devotion, Raj Bhakti. Devotion in the mood of the residents of Vrindavan, giving us that compass and that direction to move in that space. Understanding that to be the actual goal, to be the gift that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to give. And in verse number 2, we were introduced to some of the things that we should not be doing. So do not perform pious acts or sinful acts. And so staying here in Vraj, perform profuse service to Radha and Krishna, and to remember the divine couple ultimately. So understanding that there is a mundane platform, but there's something above the mundane platform. There's a term that's used, or that's mentioned in the Shastra, Manodharma, right? And sometimes it's explained sometimes that it's like when you do something in the mundane world, whether it's good or bad, ultimately it's bad. Ultimately, because it still ties us to this world. And so as long as we're tied to this world, Jama Mrityu Jara Vyadi, right? Birth, old age, disease, death. Right? So sometimes it's considered just like, someone is in prison and they have an opportunity to do something or to change their situation. And rather than change their situation, they tell the person who comes and says, what would you like to change your situation to? They say, well, you see this prison, can you paint the walls? Right? In fact, the bars, I'd like it to have like some nice decoration around the bars. There's still decorations in the prison. They don't change the fundamental nature of our situation. So these things were touched upon, things to avoid. In the third verse, this point is about the mind. If you desire in every birth to reside in the land of Raj with loving attachment, it talks about remembering and offering obeisances to our acharyas in our line, here specifically, Swarup Damodar Goswami, Rupa Goswami, their associates in Vrindavan, Sanatan Goswami, because they've given us profusely this teaching and this understanding of actually how to come into their abode. As Maharaj was explaining, Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari. In fact, our entire line, they are Manjaris, right? And so they've come from that place in the spiritual world, the most intimate place in the spiritual world, and they've given us an invitation to go back there. So now we come to verse number 4. Okay, so we will recite this together. I think it's on the screen. Okay. So as Maharaj said, I'll just say a line and then we can repeat. Asadvata Veshya Visrija Mati Savasya Haranihi Kata Mukti Vyagriya Nasrinu Kila Savatma Kilanihi Api Twaktva Lakshmi Pati Ratim Ito Vyoma Nayanim Rajirada Krishno Swarati Manido Tvam Bhaja Manaha. Okay, so we'll do the word for word. Manaha, O mind. Visrija, abandon. Asadvata Veshya, the prostitute named mundane talk. Mati Sarvasva Haranihi, the plunderer of all intelligence. Nasrinu Kila, do not listen at all to. Kataha, talks. Mukti Vyagraya, the tigress named liberation. Savatma Gilanihi, the devourer of all souls. Api Twaktva, also give up. Lakshmi Pati Ratim, attachment to the husband of Lakshmi. Sri Narayan. Vyoma Nayanim, leading to Vaikuntha. Itaha, here. Vraje, in Vraja. Tvam, you. Bhaja, serve. Radha Krishno, Shri Shri Radha Krishna. Swarati Manido, the givers of the jewel of their own love. Translation, O mind, abandon the prostitute of mundane talks, who plunders all intelligence. Do not listen at all to the stories of the tigress named Mukti, liberation, who devours all souls. Moreover, also give up attachment to the husband of Lakshmi, Sri Narayan, who only leads one to Vaikuntha. Instead, here in Vraj serve Sri Sri Radha Krishna, who give one the jewel of their own love. Okay, so what's echoed from the previous verses is again this emphasis on Radha and Krishna, service to them in Vrindavan, and where we are focusing now, and this will be for the next few verses, are the things that we have to let go of in order to move in this particular direction. So there are 3 key themes that we will touch upon in this presentation. The first key idea is that sound is the seed of our psychology. Okay, I repeat that. Sound is the seed of our psychology. The second point that we will look at is the idea that liberation is actually a trap. So liberation does not give freedom. So sound is the seed of our psychology. Liberation does not give freedom. And the third point is that the Vaishnavas aspire for Vrindavan rather than Vaikuntha. Okay, so we'll touch upon that also. So, let's go into these particular points. So this first point, sound is the seed of psychology, or the seed of our psychology. Here Raghunath Das Goswami is talking about abandoning the prostitute of mundane talks, who plunders all intelligence. There's so much more to our teachings than meets the eye. I was reading something that someone wrote. And they'd written that, for spiritual things, we read our scriptures. When it comes to practical things, then they didn't actually say it like that. To be fair to them, they implied that we go to our scriptures for spiritual knowledge, but when it comes to practical things, we may need to go elsewhere. And when I first read that, I thought, there's not quite the understanding of how deep our teachings actually are. Because our teachings actually give so much on the practical as well as the transcendental level. So this Paravidya, spiritual knowledge about the spiritual reality, Aparavidya, which is also the spiritual knowledge about how the mundane energy works. And within that, for example, here, there is such a deep understanding of the psychology of the living entity. In the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami begins by explaining Vacho Vegam Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam Udarapasta Vegam, Etam Vegam Yovishaheta Dera, Savam Apimam Privivimsha Shishyat. He's explaining about this importance of controlling this line, the tongue, the belly, the genitals. And by that control, one is able to literally give Krishna to others. The idea behind it is that one must possess oneself in order to surrender and in order to help others. In a similar way, here, when Raghunath Das Goswami is speaking about giving up mundane talks, he's alluding to a principle. So we hear about this ninefold process. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. And we think that this is a ninefold process of devotional service, and it is. But it's also a principle. It's a universal principle. Just as if you hear and chant about Krishna, you develop something within you. Right? The Bhakti Lata Beach. So we have the seed of devotion. It's watered by this process of hearing and chanting about Krishna. This verse is explaining what happens when that same process is misdirected. So here it says, abandon the prostitute of mundane talks. Right? So just like we hear and chant about spiritual things, there's also the misapplication of that whole process. Because so much of our teachings are actually universal principles. You'll see the same laws apply on the material platform or they apply on the spiritual platform. So when that process is used materially, it becomes a source of degradation. And when that same process, hearing, chanting, is used spiritually, it actually liberates the individual. So what happens here? The prostitute of mundane talks. There's so much to say about this. Let's just take a few different angles on it. This idea that sound is the seed of our psychology. When we engage in mundane talks, we water the material desires actually. It is a real science that actually much of our struggles in devotional service and in our progress in devotional life is self-inflicted. And it's self-inflicted due to ignorance. Because I'm not aware of the effects of what I'm doing, I'm developing something within me which is going against the actual goals that I'm trying to achieve. So when engaging in mundane talks, what we do is we strengthen the varshanas. Actually, let me see if I can read you. a particular quote. Let's see. So, there's a pastime. Ramachandra Puri. He actually offends his spiritual master. His spiritual master on a very exalted level, but Ramachandra Puri, when his spiritual master is expressing symptoms of real devotion, Ramachandra Puri actually has the audacity to instruct his guru. Right? So he instructs his guru. And then that is a deep, deep offense. And we'll come to that point a bit, because there's a link between the mundane gossip and actually offenses to Vaishnavas. Because it begins on a spectrum. That mundane gossip starts to lead to seeing the devotees in a mundane way. And then from seeing the devotees in a mundane way, one starts to criticize the devotees, which is the deepest negative type of mundane talk. And that pulls one down. So this is a quote. When in this pastime of Ramachandra Puri criticizing, or offending rather, his spiritual master by his behavior, Prabhupada comments on this particular pastime, and he cites Jiva Goswami from the Bhakti Sandarbha. And he writes, even for one who has attained liberation, as soon as he commits an aparad offense, his varshanas become stronger. So we have impressions within us that we carry lifetime after lifetime in many cases. I had a very, very interesting experience of this. Years ago, it's decades ago, a friend and I were speaking at the temple in London, ISKCON London. A good friend of mine. In fact, I remember he moved into the temple, this friend of mine. And he was the first of our group. He moved into the temple, he would give classes, and he'd allow me to sit on the floor next to him on the Vyasa. I'd sit on the floor, he'd sit on the Vyasa. And after he gave class, the last 10 minutes, it's like, okay, do you want to say a few words as well? And we were speaking. We were at the temple in ISKCON London, in the library. It's now the VIP room. And he'd had his astrological reading done. And the astrologer told him, he said, obviously intoxication is bad for everyone. But the astrologer warned him, said, for you it's particularly bad. He said, because in your previous life you engaged in such activity. So if you engage in that activity in this lifetime, it will bring you down very, very quickly. This idea that these impressions are already there. Many of the impressions that we have from many previous lives, we're not even aware of. But in mundane talks, and especially criticisms of Vaishnavas, those material samskars and impressions, they become stronger. And actually, it is also explained that we become more indifferent to spiritual life. So this whole process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, it works in both directions. There's this principle. A spiritual master would often say that something that's very powerful, if you use it properly, it can create great outcomes, positive outcomes. But if something's very powerful and you misuse it, it has the opposite devastating effect. So we're not always conscious about the power of the process. We're not often conscious about how these are principles. They work on all different levels. It's just a question of the goal of that activity. Hearing and chanting about what? So what happens in the life of many devotees, and what happened to this person? He actually engaged in some intoxication again in this lifetime. And, it did not go well. I remember going to visit him in a hospital, right? Because of the effects of actually taking the intoxication. And it really spoke to this. What do we water? This is what Raghunath Das Goswami is touching upon. This idea of the mundane talks. Abandon the prostitute of mundane talks who plunders all intelligence. Now this is also very important. Because by such hearing, it actually gives us a distorted vision of the world. And these distorted visions are very, very powerful because everything that we do is preceded by perception. You have an experience of this. You think someone doesn't like you, right? You think that they've said something negative about you. So when you see them, you got a certain mood towards them, right? I know she doesn't like me, right? So I'm ready for war. Okay, I'm ready to kind of defend myself, or to punch back. I've got something to say to her if she says something to me, or to say to him. So our perception precedes everything. Our perception precedes everything. And the difficulty with the mundane vibration is it gives a distorted vision of reality. And it's so subtle that it's it's extremely difficult to understand that we have that distorted perception. I'll give you one example, or maybe two examples. So sometimes we'll say, well, I know some non-devotees and they behave better than the devotees. I'm curious if anyone's ever heard that comment before. Okay, right, like that. And to be honest, in many cases, they may have very good qualities and behaviors in that sense. But there's a little bit more to it. This is where the distortion comes in. See, what tends to happen is we're not making a fair comparison. So, for example, we will often compare the non-devotee who's a bit more pious, maybe in the mode of goodness, with the devotee who's maybe in the mode of passion or ignorance. A fair comparison would be to compare the non-devotee in the mode of ignorance to the devotee in the mode of ignorance. The non-devotee in the mode of passion to the devotee in the mode of passion. The non-devotee in the mode of goodness to the devotee in the mode of goodness. That's a fair comparison. But subtly what can happen is they're all grouped in one way. Right? And so subtle shifts. Another subtlety that goes on here is that you can consider that in many cases, people who don't necessarily practice devotion, they have so many outlets for their passion. Right? So people may drink some wine, they will do so many other things. But you'll notice that with the devotees, they've given up so many of these things. So when you see the devotee, it's them without all of the, let's say, the mundane outlets for their passion. And now that same person is trying to clean up what's actually inside them. Right? So again, it's not exactly the reality that it's like for like. One group of people are doing all kinds of things. I mean, just think about it. Imagine if tomorrow there was no internet and no entertainment. Think about it. I mean, you understand this intuitively. If you took away all the things that would distract people from what's going on inside them, do you think everyone would show up the same way that they're showing up now? What do you think? Not at all. So there's a lot more going on, and this is why that spiritual knowledge is so important. But the material vision, it will often lead to a misperception. And because of the misperception, I see the situation wrongly. And therefore my response to that situation is also out of sync. I'm not responding to the reality of things, I'm responding to a particular framing, a particular view of the world. And that has consequences. This verse is very interesting for so many reasons, right? It says, do not listen at all to the stories of the tigress named Mukti, liberation. Prabhupada will sometimes explain that even those who aspire to merge into the effulgence of the Lord's body, they fall down again. So think about that. Someone's gone through all of that trouble, austerities and so on, to go in that particular direction. Prabhupada writes, but for want of association, they come back down into the material world. And he actually says that sometimes there'll be humanitarians, there'll be philanthropists and so on. But all that time, energy and trouble, and then again we fall back into this material world. But the same energy, the same effort could have given an eternal result. Very, very interesting point. It is said that when we give up the temporary for the eternal, there's no loss. Okay? You've let go of something that was going to leave you anyway, and you've given it up for something that's going to be there with you forever. We give up the temporary for the eternal, no loss. But if we give up the eternal for the temporary, we lose everything. Why do we lose everything? Because you've given up the eternal, so that's gone. You've taken the temporary, but the temporary means by definition it's going to leave you anyway. In one sense, with Krishna consciousness, the only way out is to go all the way. It's true. Yeah, when you come to Krishna consciousness, honestly, you'll see, sometimes if people decide that they're not going to practice anymore, they become like a ghost. Because they don't belong in the material world because they know so much. Right? They can't look at that steak or that hamburger the same way. They know you're eating a dead body. You're pulling a corpse into your own mouth. Are you sure you want to do this? So that's one side. And at the same time, they don't feel a sense of belonging with the association of Vaishnavas. So as devotees, now that we are in this Krishna consciousness, it is really about perfecting it. Okay? It is really about considering, what do I need to do? How do I need to navigate? How do I need to organize my life so I can get the complete goal that is being offered here by Srila Prabhupada, by our founder Acharyas. And these verses, they really speak to that. Right? They really speak to how we can actually move forward. When I was looking at some wonderful commentaries on these verses, when I was on these verses, when I was looking at this, so many different things were being shared. So, this point, this tigress, it's interesting. The words have all kinds of very special, nuanced meanings. So when you have a tiger just needs to feed himself. But the tigress, what she does is she has to feed her cubs as well. So here, O mind, abandon the prostitute of mundane talks, who plunders all intelligence. Do not listen at all to the stories of the tigress named Mukti. It means she devours everything. Right? What is it that we hear in Chaitanya Charitamrita? Mayavadi Krishna Aparadi. It's actually stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that even a Mahabhagavat can fall down if they hear Mayavad philosophy, take that association within. Even a Mahabhagavat. So it speaks to just how powerful this understanding is. And these mundane talks, as we said, they contaminate the consciousness. Because dhyato vishayam pumsa, by contemplation of the objects of the senses, which first comes by hearing about them. We hear about something, we contemplate from that attachment, right? And that attachment literally pulls us down into the material sphere. So what we are listening to is strengthening something inside us. And if we're conscious of it, we can choose to strengthen those things that bring us towards our goal. And again, recognizing that within each and every one of us, we carry certain seeds. And those seeds are different for different people. So by the mundane hearing, we actually awaken certain things that actually we don't want to awaken. And then, let's be very honest, what happens is, when these things come up, we don't think I've awakened certain seeds that I don't want to awaken. We'll think that this Krishna consciousness is absolutely impossible. Right? It's just too difficult. Right? What's Prabhupada doing? Like, how can he expect people to follow this or to follow that? And we don't understand how much is a result of what we've chosen to cultivate within us. Okay? This verse is really speaking to that. Moreover, give up attachment to the husband of Lakshmi, Sri Narayan. So as we said, so devotees, Vaishnavas, our goal is Vrindavan over and above Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is still perfect, right? Prabhupada says more perfect, most perfect. But Vrindavan is most perfect. So Lord Narayan has 96% of the qualities. Let's just get my notes out. So he has 96% of those particular qualities of Godhead. But that 4% is particularly significant. These particular attributes of Krishna within those last 4%. And they are Krishna's extraordinary leelas or pastimes. For example, the Rasa Leela. Krishna's playing of his flute. His extraordinary beauty. And his unique loving exchanges with the devotees. So what does that speak towards? It speaks to intimacy. So with Lord Narayan, this is Aishvarya, this mood of awe and reverence. But with Radha and Krishna, as Marge beautifully explained when he gave the introductory talk, we have a chance to have very deep, loving exchanges with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 5 rasas which are mentioned. Actually, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he doesn't mention Shanta Ras, he doesn't give that much focus, but the other 4 are mentioned. very, very interesting point on this. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the Krishna Samhita, he talks about the different pastimes of the Lord, and where the Lord kills different demons in Vrindavan. And these pastimes, the particular demons who are killed, they represent particular anartas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that Lord Brahma's bewilderment, the Brahma Vimohana Leela, right? Brahma steals the cows and calves, etc. He says that Lord Brahma's bewilderment represents the misconception that one should favour Aishvarya over Madhurya. He says by hearing that particular pastime, one is able to become free of this particular misconception. Right? So, of course, we're saying this because Lord Narayan, Lakshmi Narayan, is that realm of Aishvarya. But what we are being aligned to, what we are being offered, Golokera Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. Golokera Premadan. Goloka Prema Dan. Dan means wealth. The treasure of divine love in Goloka Vrindavan. Narottam Das Thakur actually says the treasure of divine love in Goloka Vrindavan has manifested in this age as a congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So Vaishnavas, we aim for Vrindavan over Vaikuntha. Understanding that we have an opportunity to have deep loving exchanges with the Lord in intimacy, sweetness, Madhurya Ras, ultimately. And we also know that, we also know that this Gramya Katha, this mundane talk, as we said, it leads to criticism of Vaishnavas. In many temples, they'll recite the 10 offences to the holy name. And the first one is sadhu ninda, right? Criticism of devotees who have dedicated their lives to the propagation of the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's given 10 defences. So he says that in order to avoid these 10 offences, there are certain things that should be positively done. And for this number one, this offence of criticism, he says in order to avoid criticising the devotees, one should glorify the Lord and the Lord's devotees. So as devotees, we're looking to see we're looking for the good in others. I asked my spiritual master about this. And because on the one hand, we're looking for the good, but sometimes in our devotional association we struggle. Sometimes as devotees we have differences of opinion. Has that ever happened to anyone in the room, possibly? Right. It's interesting. That's to be expected. Right? Because Kali Yuga is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So there's the scriptures, if they're understood properly, everything has its implied meaning. So if you know this age is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, what's implied by that? What's implied by that is that any community, any grouping, any whatever collective of individuals who are going to make it through Kali Yuga are ones who have learned to deal with conflict in a healthy way. Because disagreements are inevitable. It's not something, and this idea that it shouldn't happen because we're devotees, that's impersonalism. There's actually a letter by Prabhupada where he speaks like that. He says to expect that you won't have some differences of opinion in the association of devotees is a form of impersonalism. So we know this is the age of Kali. This is the symptom of the age of Kali. So we can get ahead of that. We can consider, what is it that I need to do about myself? How do I need to approach the devotees so that we are able to have the best possible interaction? And therefore it comes down to also this point of discrimination. So we can glorify the devotees, but we could also associate with the devotees properly. And this understanding is reverberated in the nectar of instruction. Because when one is madhyam, then one has the ability to discriminate. One knows how to interact with the devotees properly. Kanishta means I can appreciate the deity, maybe guru as well. That's about it. Everyone else, nothing. Madhyam means I understand how to associate properly. Excuse me. I understand that we will have differences of perspective. I understand also that sometimes I'm going to be wrong. Yeah. It is very healthy as devotees to seek out our own Maya. Right? What is it that I need to do differently? How can I improve? What is it that I need to work on? Especially to ask the spiritual master. But with a view towards really understanding what are these things inside me that I need to remove. This whole next series of verses is about this practical methodology. The things that need to be uprooted so that our path to Vrindavan is clear and strong. And whenever we keep hearing, it brings awareness of what's going on, many things that are going on which I'm not conscious of. As I said, many of the struggles that we have due to things that we've watered. It is a very interesting point that whatever's going on in our lives, it's always about two different points of tension. How strong my material desires are versus how strong my spiritual desires are. So what we want to do is weaken the material desires and strengthen the spiritual desires. What happens, unfortunately, in our International Society for Krishna Consciousness is often we're strengthening our material desires and we don't even realize it. By the impressions that we take in. What happens, again, the seed of our psychology is based on sound. So many things that we hear, so many impressions that we take in through the internet, television, so many different things, so many impressions that we take in, they're very dangerous because they don't immediately cause trouble. What happens instead is those impressions are there in the subconscious mind. And then, and this is why mundane talks is so dangerous, then there's a certain type of environment and there's a certain type of association and there's a certain type of discussion that actually stimulates those dormant impressions, and then they come up. And when they come up, then they become troublesome. So it is literally the case that practically throughout our movement, many devotees find devotional service much harder than it should be, not because of devotional service, but because of so many other things that are within us that we've strengthened which go against the goal that we're trying to actually achieve. So we want you to really think about that. We should think about that in our own spiritual lives. What am I watering? If I engage in criticism of Vaishnavas, as we just read, the vasanas, those impressions actually become stronger. And we become indifferent to spiritual life. Well, in one of the commentaries I was reading, it said that there's two stages of this. First of all, our knowledge becomes covered, like that. And then the second effect is that we lose our determination. Like that. So first of all, I don't see things clearly because my knowledge is covered. And then my drive for spiritual life, my enthusiasm, my determination actually starts to become more and more weak. And it's said in one place that then I get to a point where I think, you know what? You can't really become Krishna conscious in this life. It's not possible. Like that. What happens therefore is that we can either give up or we can settle in at a certain level. We had an experience like that. There was one particular devotee and something happened which was wrong. It was definitely like an unfortunate situation that happened in our institution, in our communities. But it was interesting to see how this person responded. Their response came to the point that they decided they're no longer going to practice Krishna consciousness. And in all honesty, when I was looking, I was thinking, there's something else going on here, because it's a disproportionate response to what's happened. So something's happened, I think Maharaj, you know who I'm speaking of. Something's happened, but the way that this person responded to it, it's like way, way beyond what's actually going on. Which means it's something that's sitting inside the individual. And this is the difficulty, because there's so many things sitting inside us. Marge, can you pass the microphone? Please.
I can't do it, so I won't do it.
Yeah, wow.
I've been trying to do it and it's not working, so might as well just give it up.
Yeah.
It's easier. That's the disproportion in the response.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been trying, and now I keep seeing how I'm failing in my attempt to elevate or increase my Krishna consciousness. So why try anymore? It's been proven I can't do it. Or maybe it's not even doable.
Yeah.
So might as well just give it up. And then that opens up the door to another avenue of activity, which is completely against devotional service.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get frustrated, we get angry, and then we just say, throw it all away, forget it. Why even try? It's kind of like an angry response to both the instruction and the activity, and to our own subtle attachments.
Yeah.
And then it comes into, it's easier to give it up than it is to continue to try to make it happen. Because I tried. Right? So,
Thank you.
I think that's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Raj. You know, there's so much that we can do to preempt some of these challenges as well. As Marge was saying earlier, if we're honest with ourselves, every one of us, if we just took a moment to think about it, we can tell where we're going to be, where we have some attachment. If we're honest, we can tell where we are weak, where we are vulnerable to Maya. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can understand, this is where I'm weak, this is where I have to do some more work, I have to be extra careful. If we're honest. The difficulty of the mundane world is the material energy tries to encourage everyone to be dishonest. And in a very manipulative way. The dishonesty is, let's just keep you busy. You have to think about this stuff. Don't engage in Krishna consciousness. Or if you're going to read, don't think about the books. Just read quickly and then run away and do something else. There's many different aspects of really cultivating this knowledge. There's the reading, that's very important. There's hearing it. Because when we hear, then we get an elaboration of what we're reading. Actually, when we hear, especially from realized souls, their sound vibration also has an impact. So it's not just a question of reading the books. Hearing from self-realized souls, it stimulates something very, very deep within us. I had a darshan with one spiritual master in our movement. And we were asking him about this point. Because, now you can go online and hear many classes and Zoom calls and stuff like that. And this guru, he was saying, he said, yeah, it's true, you can do that. He said, but if you can come and physically be in the presence of sadhus, it's even more powerful. He explained that. And he explained this particular term. He said, you get their guru dristi, which is their merciful glance. And then also I was listening to it was a Q&A by His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj, and he was also asked this question, and he explained it in a different way. He said, and this relates to this point again about how we're influenced by sound and interaction. He said, the thing is, when you're physically in the presence of sadhus, it actually leaves a deeper samskar. You see? It leaves a deeper impression on the consciousness. So as much as possible, hearing online is obviously better than nothing. But as much as possible, if we can actually come and be in the physical presence of the devotees, it's actually more powerful. It leaves deeper samskars, which means it helps us more to move forward because this deeper impression is there, strengthening us, nourishing our bhakti, nourishing our bhakti lata bij, our seed of devotion, so it can grow strong and luxuriant. So we shouldn't think in this internet age that all kinds of hearing is the same. It's not true. In fact, not only is it not true for all kinds of hearing, the quality of the speaker and the quality of the hearer, they also play a role. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, he says, one who is at prema can bring everyone up to that platform, can bring up to prema. In the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, he says that if someone is at bhava bhakti, they can bring a practicing devotee up to bhava, and they can bring someone who's not practicing, they can bring them up to the stage of ruchi. And he states also that someone who is practicing Krishna consciousness, but they're not yet on the stage of liberation, they can instill shraddha or faith in non-devotees. So it's not that all levels of spiritual strength are the same. That's also a misconception. The more pure a devotee is, the more we benefit by hearing, but of course it then depends on the receptivity. So what we can do is always try to make that endeavor to be in association as much as possible. And what we can also do is make the endeavor to be as receptive as possible. Since we've decided that we have come to this devotional path, it is really upon us to take it fully at heart, to heart, and get to the goal. Of course, the other thing I would say is that the beauty of this Krishna consciousness movement is that there are so many exciting ways to serve. There are so many wonderful ways in which we can engage everything in Krishna's service. You go to many other traditions, you don't have that same opportunity in the same way. Even in many traditions, they don't even have deities. But we can come here, you look at the deities, they look beautiful. Right? And then you get to dress them. And then, you go to the programs and there's like 108 different types of food. When I came to Krishna consciousness, my friends who are not vegetarian, they used to look at me thinking, you want to eat the meat, right? You want to have it, right? You sure? It's hamburger. And I told them, and they didn't even believe me. I said, look, when I go to the programs, there's over 50, sometimes 100 different things. They would have fainted had they seen it. They couldn't even imagine it. So much variety. It's an international society. Prabhupada, in one purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's talking about how he was successful, and he was talking about how he found novel ways to spread the mission. The Bhaktivedanta Institute preaching to scientists. Right? Prabhupada, when they bought a church in Canada, he said, keep the pews, right? Keep the benches so people can come and sit down and hear the philosophy and feel comfortable. A Vedic planetarium. So many innovative ways to do it. So what we are meant to do is to find ways to fully engage ourselves. As Maharaj beautifully said, this point, the preaching mission, Prabhupada makes this point. He said, engaging in the Sankirtan mission is non-different from entering into Rasa Leela. Prabhupada stated that. It's non-different from entering into Rasa Leela. Maharaj made the point, it's actually in the mood of Vrindavan. Preaching is in the mood of Vrindavan. What is that preaching? The residents of Vrindavan bringing others to Krishna, to Radha and Krishna, for their enjoyment. So whenever we do any preaching service, outreach at all, we can have that as an internal meditation. I'm assisting the residents of Vrindavan by bringing this other living entity who has an eternal identity in the spiritual world. We're bringing him back to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. And in that way, we can exist on two platforms. On one platform, we're engaging in this exciting mission, finding new, innovative ways to bring Krishna, to bring others to the lotus feet of Sri Radha and Krishna. That's on one level. And then on the inner level, we can make this connection with Vrindavan. I remember hearing this class by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he was talking about the prayers that we sing at the beginning of every class, Jai Radha Madhava. He said that these prayers are so confidential that even Prabhupada's godbrothers don't sing it. So what we can understand is that the way that Prabhupada has set up the entire movement, the whole thing is actually intimately laced with Braj Bhakti. Yeah, Tulsi prayers, right? We're asking to become a maidservant. All of these things are there, and they take on deeper and deeper meaning as we go deeper into our practice, and we practice and engage in service with a different mentality. with this mood, this understanding that all of these things are connected to Vrindavan. And ultimately, because there's an understanding that the sadhana and the sadhya have to be connected. Sadhya means the goal. So if our goal is Vrindavan, then the practice also has to have some of that element within it. Therefore, Tulsi prayers, but with a proper understanding of those prayers. Seeing the deities, understanding who we are actually looking at. As Marge said, Tadbhava, just continually, regularly hearing. Krishna book is there. Krishna book is a summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the most intimate aspect of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada writes again and again, do not jump to the 10th canto. And then what does he do? Krishna book 1 and 2, he says, distribute it to everyone. Give it to everyone. And in fact, George Harrison writes something in the foreword to make it, because what he's showing is that's the mission. That's what Prabhupada actually came to give. Maybe one other point, and then we'll open up for questions. I don't want to take too much time. One other point. The struggles that we have in Krishna consciousness are good, okay, if they're understood properly. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is explained that the difference between lust and love is a difference between trying to gratify our senses, which is lust, as opposed to trying to gratify Krishna's senses, which is love. The engagement in the Sankirtan mission, and that engagement means not only spreading Krishna consciousness outside, but also spreading Krishna consciousness within the association of devotees. In that engagement, it is undoubtedly the case that we will meet with obstacles and challenges. Undoubtedly. And those obstacles and challenges are to do what? They're to squeeze out of us every single trace of selfishness. Because in order to approach Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, to fully realize them, one has to be free of this lust, right? Self-centered desire. And that path to do it is actually coming by pleasing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by pleasing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we ultimately get his blessing. And who is he? Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna, Nahi Anya. So the methodology that helps us to also come to this particular platform, which is being explained by Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, is this Sankirtan mission as well. But it's the Sankirtan mission with the proper understanding and the proper mood. So, some thoughts on this fourth verse of Manah Shiksha. Maybe we open up for Q&A. Any questions? Yes. Can we pass the microphone, please?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the insight. It feels like our communication with Vaishnavas is even harder than non-devotees. And my question is, if we're always watching what we're going to say, how can it then develop organically? How can we be natural?
Yeah. If we're always watching what we're going to say, how can we be natural and how can it develop organically? I'm going to take it from a slightly different angle. It's never the case that everyone will understand or appreciate the way that we approach devotional service. There's a term, it's in the purple third canto of Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says swajati. Right? In fact, there's also a verse, snigdha swajatiya. Snigdha means affectionate. Right? So there's the understanding that we are trying to associate with devotees who have affection and also who are like-minded, like that. So when I asked my spiritual master about this, we were at Bhaktivedanta Manah, and he said to me, he said, sometimes our chemistry, the chemistry between us and another person, is such that we won't necessarily be on the same wavelength. He said, but we can always have respect, appreciation and affection for all the devotees. But who we may be close to, that's a different question. So we can try our best. We can also get feedback. Is it that there's something I'm doing wrong? And the reason why I say we can get feedback is not from the point of view that we're at fault necessarily, but we can only control our part of the equation. What causes frustration for many of us in the association of devotees is that we still hold on to this idea that I'm the controller. And the way it manifests in relationships is that you should change. Right? What's wrong with you? Why do you speak to me like that? Don't you know who I am? Like, you should change the way you show up. You should change. But we see for ourselves, often we can't change our own bad habits. So telling other people that they should change for us, they can't change for themselves. Right? So we have to have our feet very much on the ground. We try our best, but also we take advice. So I try my best first of all. There's some sincere desire. There's a sincere endeavor. I take advice because there's an angle that I may have missed. So when I take advice, this is how I'm approaching it. Am I missing something? Right? Because often what happens is when we speak to other people, other devotees, but especially with a sincere, I actually want to know the truth. It has to be there. If I approach in that particular mood, often I had this experience myself, often Krishna will use that devotee or those devotees to tell us something that we need to hear. It works like magic, and therefore we have Priti Lakshanam, 6 loving exchanges. So we do our best, and sometimes we have to also see that having done our best, maybe this is just not working out. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, necessarily, but we have a different mood. My spiritual master talked about one of these God brothers. He said, he and I, we can hardly agree on anything. That's what he said to us. He said, but I respect him like anything, because I respect how it takes different types of generals to win a war. Different types of generals to win a war. So it's not that there's only one way to be Krishna conscious. There's one flavor in Krishna consciousness. You'll even see sometimes different seniors, they attract different types of devotees. There are some seniors, even some gurus, they attract people who are a bit hardcore, right? Like, get out the way, Guru Maharaj is here. You get a kind of certain vibe, Others, they may attract some people who are very sweet, different personalities. But actually it's okay. The mission is to bring everyone back. But for that to work, again, this selflessness is really important. The more that we get out of the center, the easier it is to practice, the easier it is to see everything clearly, because it's no longer Atmavan Manyate Jagat. Right? Atmavan Manyate Jagat means everything's in reference to me. Everyone sees the world from their own perspective. Why aren't they like me? What's wrong with them? How could you not like my singing, Prabhu? Yeah, this kind of mood is there. But actually, no, why should they like your singing? They may like something else, right? They may be enlivened by a different approach to Krishna consciousness. To this point, sometimes different devotees distinctly need opposite things. Someone in their previous life, they were a yogi. In this life, the most difficult thing for them is to be in association, because they've had so many lifetimes just being by themselves. And now, the challenge for them to progress is you have to be in association, deep association, spiritual association. Someone else is the opposite. They just love being around the devotees, but it's very social. There's a term about different types of Shraddha. There's Shastriya Shraddha, which is the faith that comes from scriptures. But there's also a type of Shraddha which is, I think the term is, was it Loka Shraddha? There's a certain term which means the Shraddha that comes by being part of the crowd. So you'll see that sometimes people, they're there because it's about social belonging. Laukika Shraddha, that's it. Laukika Shraddha. It's about social belonging. So I'm fired up in Krishna consciousness because I'm doing what everyone else is doing. It's not because I actually understand what should be done. Yeah, and so if everyone else is going off a cliff, yeah, what? Haribol! We're going to do that with enthusiasm because we're all in it together. It's like, no, they're going in the wrong direction. You shouldn't be doing that. In fact, your job is to tell them, we need to turn around. This is not the right direction. Like that. So anyway, not to digress, but the point is that we try our best, but we also take advice, and then we have to also understand sometimes it's the case that maybe there's a different type of association that's going to be more healthy for us. Okay? So it's not that we have to always be stretching in ways that kind of just cause us so much trouble. But we have to look at it, the specific exchange. Now, the one other thing I'll add though is if we find that we're having a certain type of challenge, more or less with a large number of people, that can be an indication that it's definitely something that I need to change about myself. Right? In other words, if I keep running into the same challenge with many different devotees, then it's likely that, well, all of them, they all have an issue with you, and they all have the same, not you, I'm just saying, they all have the same issue with you, then it's like, okay, then that probably indicates there's just something, right, okay, what am I doing wrong? Right? Why is it I'm always, everyone's telling me, Prabhu, you're like this, or this is not healthy, like that. Does that help in some way? Thank you for your question. Do we have can pass the mic to Machi behind, please?
You can go overtime today.
It's okay?
It's okay to go overtime.
Okay.
Because the next thing is, we have 15-minute break.
Yes.
And then there's prasadam.
Okay.
So you can go into the break and prasadam will still start. So
Okay.
you have 15 minutes extra.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Prabhuji, thank you so much for the class. So when you are talking about the impressions, previous life's impressions, so when we are aspiring for going back to home, back to Godhead, so will they come in our way, like how to deal with them in our process of devotional service?
Yes. So Krishna says, Ante kalijamameva sparmutva kalevaram yaprati samadbhavam yatinasya samsayaha. So whatever we think about at the time of death, that will definitely determine where we go. However, the whole point of devotional service is we can create those spiritual samskars. The Goswamis talk about this, bhakti samskars. And they say that those samskars are actually impressions on the soul proper, at that level. So our whole process is to create those deep spiritual impressions. And they will save us, actually. This is also why attention is so powerful. It's also why sound is powerful. So there's a term in modern psychology called neuroplasticity. And it's found that sound increases neuroplasticity. When you use sound, it leaves a deeper impression on the consciousness. When you do something with attention, it leaves a deeper impression in the consciousness. When you do something repeatedly, it leaves a deeper impression in the consciousness. And when you do something with feeling, it leaves a deeper impression in the consciousness. Now let's think about this statement by Prabhupada. He said you should chant just like a child calling for their mother. Think about that, right? That child calling for their mother, it's calling for their complete shelter and protection. They'll have deep, strong, full emotion in that kind of calling. And then we're doing these practices every single day. In fact, also doing things earlier in the morning leaves a deeper impression as well. So there's a deep science to all of this practice. Very, very deep practice. And the more that we do that, it's not just a question of impressions, it's a question of the strength of those impressions. Like that. But we don't worry about that. What we try and do is just engage in the process as best as possible, because actually beyond our own endeavor, there's also Krishna's mercy. So in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.3.35, Rupa Goswami says, Na prema shravanadi bhakti apiva. He says, I don't have na prema, I don't have love of Godhead. Shravanadi bhakti, nor love for the process of hearing and chanting about the Lord. Then he goes on to say, I don't have a high birth, mystic abilities, piety. He says, but because you, dear Lord, give your mercy to the most fallen. It's that this unbreakable hope which is always in my heart, this hope is always giving me pain. So Krishna's mercy is greater than his law. Yeah, like that. But we should try our best. Ayendra Prabhu, he said this once, he said, Krishna doesn't want to be taken cheaply. Right? Yeah, I think we can relate to that, right? So, you're trying to help someone and they take you for granted. It's like, yeah, Krishna's there, he'll save me. It's okay. Or we'll do something else. He'll get around, I know he'll look after me anyway, so I don't need to worry. He doesn't want to be taken cheaply. So he plays hard to get sometimes. Yeah. So the idea, yeah, sometimes, more all the time. So our job is to try our best, but he is a loving person. And even more than Krishna is the devotees. Our real hope is that if we please the devotees, Krishna will pay attention. Right? And of course, Shushukam Kartam Avyayam. Actually, also, if you do something joyfully, it leaves a deep impression. Right? You can, if I was to ask you in the room, think back to a kirtan that you really liked, you'll be able to remember. Right? It was a very moving experience. Your emotions were involved. Sound was there. Everyone's chanting together. It's very powerful. So we don't worry. We try our best, and we also constantly petition the Lord and His devotees for their grace, for their mercy. Kripa. And that Kripa will perfect everything as long as we're trying our best as well.
So it all depends on our chanting and the sadhana.
It depends. Yes, that's there. Even also the association. The root is association. And one of the reasons why it's considered the root is because by the association they give us the holy name. They give us the understanding of how we can chant the holy name properly, like that. So it's the association, and yes, the holy name is there, the association is there, and we try to do it consistently and also sincerely. So the quantity, repetition, but also the quality, how much we do it with a deep and open heart, with a deep eagerness to hear and chant and grow in spiritual life. Prabhupada was going somewhere, and one of his disciples ran to the car just before Prabhupada was going to leave, and they were asking about the secret of advancement. Prabhupada said one word, he said desire. Does that answer your question? Thank you for your question. Okay. Does anyone else have it? Sudevi? Sri Devi. He's going to give me a knockout question that I cannot answer. She probably will, actually. It's okay. Sri Devi.
Don't forget about the men.
Oh, yeah. Go to the men's side soon.
Hold it, keep it pressed down.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol,
Haribol.
thank you. Prabhu, thank you for this very deep and introspective and thought-provoking presentation. As you were speaking, I was remembering His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, about how much he wanted loving communities, and he gave the 4 principles of community building and conflict resolution. In that, Maharaj said conflicts actually are a chance to clarify perception and create synergy.
Yes.
So when we actually go that extra mile and try to sort things out and we actually become closer. There's more bonding, there's more strengthening of that mutual connection, there's greater understanding and beautiful things. And the thing is, we are scared. It is a very scary place to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Another thing is, many of us who have come to Krishna consciousness, we've completely left our families, our previous association, and now we're trying to build our Krishna conscious family. So we're triggered. Somebody triggers me, as my mother triggered me because of her demeanor, or her criticism, or her heavy attitude, and then I want to stay away because this person reminds me of how my mother was. These things play out in our spiritual life also. So just some thoughts that I wanted to share. And I have a small question. You said, even a Mahabhagavat can fall down because he listens to Mayavad philosophy.
Yeah.
You
So this comes from Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yes.
Can you just share that reference?
I'll have to find it for you because I read it in one of the commentaries to this particular verse. But I can show you. We can find it.
Oh,
Yeah, it's definitely there.
thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. So I'll make a comment on what you said also because I think it's really important. So yeah, this point about people leaving their families and trying to build relationships with the devotees. Yeah, it's definitely true. And of course, we also will have different challenges like that in spiritual life. So every devotee will have their own battle of Kurukshetra.
All the time.
Yeah. Every devotee will have their own, hopefully not all the time, but sometimes we'll have our own battle of Kurukshetra. But but we can receive or we can experience our challenges from a position of strength. One of the things I was looking at, very transparently, I was looking at the instructions I'd been given by my gurus, plural, not just my initiating spiritual master, my Shiksha gurus as well. And I even saw how the instructions that we've been given, they almost, well, not almost, they situate you in such a way that you meet some of your challenges from a position of strength if they're followed. It's a mystical process, this Krishna consciousness. So you may be told to do something, and you may think it's not a big deal. But actually, if you do it, what you'll find is, even as the challenges come, you can meet those challenges in a stronger way, in a healthier way, in a deeper way. Because ultimately, it's between you and Krishna. If we're sincere, what happens is, it's like this. You have an exam coming up. Krishna knows you have an exam. What is the Bhagavad Gita? What is the Srimad Bhagavatam? What is the CC? Chaitanya Charitamrita? It's the answer book. Here's the answers. You're going to have an exam. You're going to get an examination in 2 weeks' time. We're going to arrange for you to read and hear what you need to know before the exam comes. So, yes, challenges will be there, absolutely. At the same time, the strength to overcome those challenges is also made available. Right? It's just a question of how much we understand and how much we take advantage. Yeah. The analogy that was given once is just like this. You're working a 9-to-5 job, and you have a really strict manager. Right? Lunchtime is only from 12 p.m. till 1 p.m. You can't leave the desk before then. But you hear that around the corner from you, the bank, around the corner, anyone who gets to that bank at 2:30 p.m. will be given a significant sum of money. No matter how strict your boss is, you will find a way to get to that bank at 2:30 p.m. to claim that money. So what's happening is, it's the strength of our desire for Krishna versus our indifference to Krishna consciousness, or let's put it another way, our desires for Maya. It's always how the two compare, actually. And therefore, when we will have challenges with devotees. Absolutely. Absolutely the case. Because we're all coming from different angles. We're coming not just from different angles in this lifetime, we're coming from different angles in previous lives. It's possible that some of the devotees are people who had a real disagreement with you in a previous life, and they don't let that go, right? They remember, well, they don't have the conscious awareness, but they remember like, oh, that Malaji, well, she really caused me like a lot of heartbreak or whatever, and in this life there's something going on. But we want to see, what am I meant to learn from this? And we approach in the mood of service, because that gives us strength, actually. What we're looking for is the strength to deal with whatever we need to deal with in this lifetime in order to go back home, back to Godhead. Yeah, like that. Oh, thank you for your question. Do we have any question from the men's side? Oh, Raj Mukunda? Okay, and then we'll come back.
Somebody else has a question?
Yeah, there's enough questions on the women's side. We'll take your question, then we'll go.
Hey Krishna, thank you for the amazing session in class. So you got 4 options.
No!
And I don't want you to pick one, but I want you to tell me which one's the highest. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question on what you answer based on what you've said.
He's trying to catch me out.
So, out of these, which one is the highest? Attaining liberation, attaining Vrindavan, CC pastimes with Lord Chaitanya, being with Prabhupada, or coming back as Bhuta Bhavana, serving Bhakti Swami, and so which one of these is the most important or highest from your perspective?
Can you give me the options again?
Vrindavan.
Then Vrindavan.
Yeah, with Krishna in Vrindavan.
Okay.
Being in a Chaitanya Charitamrita Leela with Lord Chaitanya. Being with Prabhupada directly and serving him. Or being Bhuta Bhavana and carrying out your spiritual master Bhakti Swami's instructions and serving his mission and being his representative. Which one of these 4 is the highest?
See, I'm going to go with Maharaj's answer before. No, because, seriously, I'm going to go with Maharaj's. When you're with Prabhupada, there's a statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, wherever that pure devotee is, that place is Vrindavan. right? That place is Vrindavan. And also, what my spiritual master, what does he want? He wants everyone to go back home, back to Godhead. So if I'm following his instruction, that's also, they're all linked. They're all linked. So I'm gonna I'm gonna borrow Marge's intelligence, and that's my answer to that question. So yeah. Next question. Nice try, though. Any,
He's just trying to write a book.
yeah, I can understand, no? So I'll buy it when it comes out. Any other questions? And then I think we should stop at 6:30 so devotees can have prasad. Where's the mic? Okay, so you could pass, please.
I think the battery's running out.
Okay.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. I feel here we should feel really blessed because we've been lots of difficulties and challenges and struggles. And I have to sometimes get overwhelmed and get kicked out and somebody, so many things. So we should feel blessed that sometimes the inner blessing of that, spark a little more peace, so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I just want to say something to that. Honestly, sometimes we go through challenges that we don't need to go through. Sometimes. So, there are some challenges which are genuinely unavoidable and they're meant for our progress. It's true. But I also see that sometimes due to the misapplication of the teaching, therefore we go through challenges that we don't need to go through. I'll give one simple allusion to this. You see, if we learn the teachings very deeply, we understand this person is a Kanishta Adhikari, this person is a Madhyam, this person is an Uttama Adhikari. Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai, Shri Gaunitai ki jai, Radha Madhav ki jai. So for example, if we understand how to discriminate in devotional service, it actually changes what we expect of people. Right? If I know what to expect, if I know someone's a Kanishta Adhikari, I don't expect them to be very sensitive and interact in a certain way. Because I understand, according to these symptoms, this person is at this stage. So therefore I expect this of them. I don't expect them to be above that. If someone's a Madhyam, I have a different expectation. If someone's an Uttama, I have a different expectation. Now you can even take it a step further. You can even say that based upon a person's nature, you have different expectations. There are some devotees, they're more Brahminical. They want to live simply and they're just studying and reading very simple. Others have a different tendency, and all of these things are mentioned. All of these things are mentioned. So we have to, our expectation shouldn't be based upon our own opinion. And I'm not saying you're like this, I'm just making the point generally. But our expectation should be based upon what Scripture says. And I can tell you from my own experience, if we did just that one thing, if we adjusted our expectations according to what Scripture says, you would see that the vast majority of issues would immediately go down because you just change what you're expecting of people. So it's a big thing, but it's a whole science in of itself. But yeah, so I'll just make that comment. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we should stop there because it's time. And thank you very much. And Sarah Vijayal.